We just also discussed just before we took a short break. Welcome back. I'm holding court this morning with Engineer Patrick Obath, who's the chair of Kenya, that is KEPSA Foundation. Also, we are holding court with Exen Iraqi, who's a professor at the School of Business, Nairobi University. Also, we have the chair of Kenya Development Corporation. This is Bunyasi Sakwa. And we're holding court with the chair also of Kenya Diaspora Alliance. This is Dr. Shem Ochuolo. But we want to just focus on the Kenyans' financial distress. As we've seen in the dailies before we took a short break, 48% of Kenyans are in financial distress. Even the coping mechanisms such as borrowing have not met their demands. This is according to Mutual Financial Services Research Organization. The economic shamble is attributed to inflationary trends, which has greatly reduced people's purchasing power.
The fact that customers do not need to go and fill in long forms, sit in the bank, and wait for a couple of days to get a response, and rather they go online, 2 seconds later they've got a response, declined or approved, will make access to credit faster. Credit access is generally expanding and quite fast. We have the short-term loans, for example, which has become very readily accessible through various digital platforms. We even have the Hustler Fund. I think where you probably are going is around the cost and the tenor, because short-term financing can only be for fast-moving stocks. I think the other thing that CBK has done is try to bring all the lending institutions, the digital lenders, etc., under the umbrella and licensing of the central bank. That helps to expand options for lending under regulated institutions.
If you look at the Business Daily also, that is what is on the front page of the Business Daily. Half of Kenyans financially stressed as pay shrinks 25%. Just to follow up what we were hearing from All Mutual Financial Services there. And we want just to put this into perspective, alongside the hustlers that are to pay 3,000 shillings rent daily for city roadside. This latest development, so what does it mean? We have also the People Daily warning us that prepare for expensive key food prices. Cost of living set to rise in the next 3 months due to high input values and exchange rate depreciation, says top banker Thuge. I wanted just to hear from Patrick Obath. When you look at this, we understand everyone is eagerly waiting to see also how EPRA will set the prices next week. People are saying the prices are bound to go down because also the cost of a barrel of oil has gone down. Despite the fact that we have Hamas and Israel war ongoing and the Red Sea being affected currently, so that we have rerouting of some of these ships that is making also the shipment cost very expensive. Is this a headline we should be reading today that we should prepare? I think Kenyans, there are notches on the belt actually now. It's maybe now on the buckle. It's near the buckle itself. Now you'll just be now making notches on the buckle itself because it's made a full circle on your belt. So do we have any notches to actually tighten our belt, as they say? Patrick Obath.
I think our economy is in distress, serious distress. That's my view, and it is. There's a number of factors, and they're both external and internal, and the way we're managing the economy in the country. I'm not an economist myself, but just as a consumer of what you're seeing in the country, what you see is, first of all, I mean, the level of taxation is going north all the time, and when we talk about the production of food and everything else, which is my basic pot of things that I want to eat, whilst they've done subsidized fertilizer, there's a whole host of other inputs which are being affected by the dollar, which are part of what goes into farming. So the cost of food isn't going down as fast as should have happened based on the interventions that are going on. So that is hitting everybody's pocket and making life even more difficult for your average Kenyan from that point of view. Energy prices are going up, right? The 16%, the 8% additional VAT on fuel, right? And that fuel, diesel and everything else is what is the bedrock of agriculture. That's what they use. They use fuel in large agricultural concerns. And even just the whole ecosystem of agriculture uses fuel within that ecosystem. So the cost of basic commodities and everything else in this country has not come down. Much as people might say, yes, the harvest time it comes down, that is seasonality. But when you look at the average price through the whole year, the cost of food commodities in this country has not gone down, it's going the other way. So when you talk about this issue of tightening of belts, I mean, that extra notch on the belt that you need to make is not there, because any place that you could have actually begun to make savings and do whatever is being attacked. Even the cash that I used to buy, right? The value of that cash is becoming, is becoming expensive. Loans, what have you, everything else. How is that interest rate that is being increased is going to come into the economy somehow? It's not just going to stick there. So as a person who lives in Kenya, I'm seeing all these indicators all over the place, yeah. And I'm just thinking, how am I going to survive as an individual, right? I cannot tighten my belt anymore, right? The belt has run out of space to tighten, right? We really need to do drastic items, and I think these great ideas that are supposed to spur the economy on in terms of building affordable houses, doing big infrastructure projects, doing whatever it is and so forth, it may be time to just take a pause and rejig the way the country is being run economically, right? Tighten in the right places. And if I tighten in the right places, then as a Kenyan, a consumer of whatever is going on in this economy, I'll begin to support the government and say, yeah, we're going the right way. And as I've always said here, the first thing that any company, any economy that is struggling, we have to cut down costs. Nothing else. We have to cut down costs. And again, as a private sector person, you stop projects. You stop capital expenditure. That's the first thing you do. Because capital expenditure is long-term in terms of the returns, especially in the social space. And what you do is you cut down the fat in your system. Even a company, you send people home, right? And as typically you have the favorite cutting places. Advertising spend, yeah, that's a good feel-good factor.
Yeah. Come slowly. Yeah. We did advertising here.
I know you did that, but in any company,
don't say it loudly.
In any company that is struggling, those are the kind of things they cut off first, yeah, and they remain with the basic core costs that are required to keep the business running. So Kenya Inc. as a company, what are the core costs that we need to keep the business of Kenya running? Yeah. And the business of Kenya Inc. is to provide services to the Kenyan citizen. So those ones you ring fence. Everything else you stop doing until such time as you got extra money. And I think that much as we are, there's all these things people are tinkering around with. The basic fundamental thing we have to do, which is painful, especially for politicians, we have to trim the size of government and the government budget.
That's all right. So this is the radical surgery that we do need, and the big ticket projects, the turnkey projects that we are seeing. We're talking about housing that is capital heavy. We are bleeding financially. The cash flow is not there completely. Is it maybe the prime solution that we should do now? We stop the projects so that at least we can have money in circulation. As much as we want to deduct from people's pay slips, there won't be enough money also to the purchasing power to buy these things that will spur the economy. Where do we go regarding this? Will it be another question of qualitative easing? And even if it's a qualitative easing, how will that be a prime solution? Because also the inflation will still go up. Now we have the banking's lending rate now at 13%. We're going back to where we were before, even with the lending rate debate that was there before.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's an interesting subject, fascinating, many angles to it. Before I come, first I agree with my colleague Patrick Obath here broadly in what he's saying in containing expenditure to be able to make do with the revenue levels that you've got. Revenue comes from taxation. Now, but one of the things that Kenya has suffered from, and it wasn't a subject that was much raised, and when a few people did raise it, it was never picked up. At the time, we were worrying about a rapid rise, a steep rise in public debt. We also had, Kenya was experiencing a huge increase in household debt, personal debt. That the headroom, even for households, was narrower and narrower. And that happens partly inflation eats some of it away. And as costs rise and your income is rising as fast, it eats up some of that. It's like you're being progressively submerged and you run a risk of getting your nose under the water, then you're not even be able to breathe. And some of the basic indicators we said was on the budget, for example, the share of debt. We always talk about debt in GDP. That is one way of making it something in the clouds, but putting it home. Share of debt in the budget, annual budget, for the cash that's collected. We had reached a point of about 73 shillings per 100, which means for every 100 you collect, 73 shillings are going into debt servicing. There isn't room for any other things, very few other things, because in there you have security charges, you have health, you have education, infrastructure, everything else. So you can't fit it in, so you go out and again borrow and borrow more, and you squeeze the system even more. So if half of Kenyans are feeling financially squeezed, this is originating from high household debt, but also high public debt, eating away the resources that would have supported the public services. For me, the central bank should now come out more honestly for the ordinary citizen in terms of what they do. They cause pain. A lot of times they cause pain in terms of how they try to fix the system. They're like people who treat diabetes. If it hits your leg, they'll patch it for a little bit and they say, no, the only way to do this, let's cut it off. And of course, you cut off one of my legs, then I remain with one, and the other goes, you cut it off, until you reach a point where you can't do any more cutting and you send me to the grave. They haven't found anything much better. This raising of rates like the central bank has done is to discourage people from borrowing, from creating money into the economy, to reduce inflation. And hopefully, as inflation comes down, this one should be lowered and lowered and lowered as it should be. It can be as low as zero, as it has happened in countries like Japan in the recent decades and so on. But it can also be quite high when you are trying to contain inflation. It's a painful journey to walk. I think central banks should come out and say, we are doing this, these are the implications. Make the economics of it be like 101 economics, as it were, be the basic thing for people to understand why this is part of that has been necessary. But be it as it may, I am grateful to Dr. Kamau Thuge, the governor, for at least coming out and talking about it. And I think he'll do this, he'll continue to do it as often as he's now beginning to do. Before, we weren't hearing anything. For a while, things were just silent and you would just get hit every morning as you wake up. So I want first of all to say, yes, these are hard times. It's indeed going to be tough. Headlines like key food crops will go up in the price don't help. I think there must be another way of saying that. It's true that the production subsidies, and it wasn't the entire thing, but it's a very good step. There are other things to continue to look at, and I think this now, people are increasingly getting aware of this. So I think we're going to pass through hard times, and but I see this as part of the treatment. It is still a quinine tablet that they have not coated. Maybe they should coat it a bit more, so we should still take the quinine, but we don't have to suffer the bitterness.
Right. All right, talking about the rates, we just want to hear from also the governor himself who spoke yesterday. so that we can actually also put our discussion into perspective, which is up next when he talked about the lending rates.
February 2024, at a time when inflation has risen from 6.6% in December 2023 to 6.9% in January 2024. This hike in the cost of living was caused by the rise in the consumer price of non-vegetable food items, fuel and electricity, as well as the Kenya shilling depreciation against the US dollar and other hard currencies. According to CBK Governor Kamau Thuge, raising the central bank rate is an additional measure to stabilize the country's exchange rate.
Central Bank's policy on the exchange rate is to allow the exchange rate to be determined by market forces. It is my view now that the exchange rate has overshot the equilibrium rate, so there could be scope for central bank to support the exchange rate.
The increase in rates to 13% carries implications for both businesses and consumers, leading to potentially higher interest rates on loans and credit facilities.
So we expect to see credit become more expensive and thus constraining access, affordability, not access, sorry. Yeah, so that's number one. Then another issue is we expect to see is a rise in government yields, in that now investors will demand more. For example, with banks, they have to give higher deposits when they increase the higher deposit rates when they increase the loan rates.
Yet more pressure is being felt in the economy from the decline of the shilling against the dollar, with the CBK moving to tame imported inflation, though this may not be the major cause of the issue. These and other moves are targeted at ensuring better flow of cash across the economy in order to bolster fundamentals.
We have seen some interest by foreign investors in government securities. We are in the process of issuing the infrastructure bond, and we have seen significant foreign interest in purchasing the infrastructure bond, and therefore we expect also foreign exchange to come in from the purchase of the infrastructure bond.
Purchase of infrastructure bond, and I know now there's a very attractive interest rate when it comes to the infrastructure bond, but still also we can put into perspective where the Kenya's debt is going, which has increased by 450 billion shillings in 5 months to November 2023, as the shilling weakened against major foreign currencies amid more borrowing from multilateral lenders. Now the external debt stock stood at 5.89 trillion shillings by the end of November, up from 5.4 trillion shillings by the end of June 2023, an increase of 449.9 billion shillings on the stock from July to November. The Central Bank of Kenya data on the state of public debt by November shows that overall public debt increased by 608.4 billion shillings over the 5 months to stand at 10.887 trillion shillings. Now, this means that external debt accounted for 74% of the additional stock of the public debt. The external debt moved from 5.4 trillion shillings in June to 5.5 trillion shillings in July. The 5.61 trillion shillings in August, 5.67 trillion shillings in September, and 5.7 trillion shillings in October. Its share of the total public debt stock increased from 53.5% to 54.2% over the 5 months. The CBK data shows this. Now, the external debt increased by 8.3% during the 5 months. And I know there's a lot of figures that they're going way over your head, so let me not bore you stiffly with those stories. But it just gives an indication of where we're at and how we should be bracing for the next 3 months of the food items. Your ugali, your bread, you need to pare down on that. Maybe if you're taking 1 or 2 sausages, like ex and Iraqi, now forget about it. We want to come to you.
I think my diet is very different from what you have just said, but I think you're raising a very fundamental issue here. And maybe before I go to debt, I need to add something from on what my colleague said. I don't believe half of Kenyans are in financial distress.
You don't believe so?
It must be more than that. I'll probably put it 75%. When you talk to your relatives, you talk to people on the streets, everybody's in a lot of distress. And one simple way to find out is the number of WhatsApp harambes that people have, people looking for money. And the other thing is when you drive on the Kenyan roads, you'll be surprised how empty they have become. We used to have empty roads in the middle of the month. Now they are becoming empty at the start of the month. So I think more Kenyans are suffering from that. I think the problem is one, fuel. The fuel prices are still very high. That's having a bad effect on the economy. The food prices. I didn't know until now we have something called non-vegetable food prices. I've always thought food is food, but now they talked of something new. And power. Last time when we sat here, somebody said that the power cost has gone up by 70% this year. So if you combine all this, one thing comes out. People are distressed because they cannot pay their bills and they don't have the money. Now, to make matters worse, the central bank has raised the rates. What does that mean? It means that we are going to borrow less. And if we borrow less, we are going to spend less and invest less. And that is going to have a downward pull on the economy, which I'm very surprised. Now, the central bank is saying we want to show up the sharing and we want the sharing to become stronger. But the consequences are probably worse because the sharing might become stronger, but we are not consuming, we're not borrowing money. The credit is, we are going to borrow less from the bank. And as my colleague put, you also add the taxes have gone up. So combine all those things and you can see Kenyans are in distress. Now, one of the things we are forgetting when we talk about Kenyans in financial distress is the emotional and the physical effect of that. A lot of people are emotionally very drained. People are even going to get sick because when people are so stressed over a long period of time, they suffer. Any solution? I think all over the world, anytime the economy is distressed, we cut taxes and we cut the interest rates. I don't know why we are doing the opposite. Maybe one of the things, the other thing we need to do is we need to build confidence in the economy. I think when you look at all these headlines ahead of us here, they are all negative. And I think one of the things our leaders need to start doing is to build confidence in us. Even if things are bad, somebody should be telling us things are going to become better. If there's no food in my house, I don't tell my students, my kids that you are going to starve tonight. I must give them hope. Tell them things are going to be better. But I think there's too much negativity, there's too much pessimism in this country that we need.
You need to prime them that there's a storm coming. Maybe, some of the cookies that will need to go down, will go to... You need to prime them as well, and this is what the governor is actually priming Kenyans as well.
You need to tell them that you can eat bread without bluebird. It's still
yes.
bread.
Dr. Baal, I think there is also the talk of 3,000 shillings.
Yeah, we'll come to that. So let's just exhaust this so we come to the 3,000 and how that is bound to affect.
My final comment before I go to this, to him. The debt, you said the debt is going up. Which is very surprising because we have always thought that with more taxes there will be less debt.
But of course with the inflation as well, this is growing. And with the fragile shilling losing, that is bound to also make the
devaluation by itself. You say 74% of the increase is from exchange rate.
From exchange rate, yeah.
And I think that exchange rate issue, if we manage our balance of payments and make sure that we've got sufficient dollars sitting around and we can meet our whatever it is, you'll find that the Kenya shilling will actually...
Yeah, it is. That's true.
And all these things that are happening because we have to raise the money in shillings to pay our debt.
In dollars.
In dollars, right? And the key thing that I believe the central bank governor's main job is to look at that thing and make sure that that balance of payments is right and that the stock that we have of dollars in the country, wherever it is that the stock sits, is enough to meet our obligations for 6 months, right? That's 6 months, I think, for me, and the experts in that area will correct me. 6 months roughly. If you're in that area, you are comfortable completely, and everything will come down to a place where, we're operating normally within, inflation is controlled, cost of living is there, imports are good, exports are earning money, etc., etc. I think there needs to be a focus on getting us to where the balance of payments are right. But at the moment, I think we are suffering seriously from that imbalance.
Dr. Shemachodo?
The governor says, and I think to an extent is right, that by raising the interest rates, one expects that FDI, foreign direct investments, will grow. It may or it may not, but obviously when government declares an infrastructure bond with a high return rate, there's likely to be increased appetite. But then again, one would have thought that by increasing the interest rates and also, of course, the weakening of the shilling would have been good news for exporters. But where we are failing is I don't think government is doing enough to promote production that could be, particularly manufacturing, that could be exported out. I think in that regard we are doing badly. But it's not all lost. There are also some good news. I was listening to a media house last night, and the KPLC was reported to say that because of forex variations, the cost of electricity is going to come down. I think I was hearing what sounded like good
music
news.
To your ears.
Yes, for the first time in a long time. In fact, a media house, not your media house, even went further to say from midnight last night, fuel prices were going to go down. I don't think it happened, but the fact that that's anticipated.
Well, I think it should be next week.
One media house said from midnight.
From midnight?
Yeah, I heard it, but it's not your media house.
Okay.
So, I think what Kenyans need now is somebody that builds hope. They need to be inspired, not when you give them news like the prices are going to get worse in 3 months' time. Because, yes, psychologically, mentally, again, we've said around this show that almost every day in local media, we hear of people taking their own lives or others' lives almost daily for very little, small things, sometimes even just for fights over 100 bob or 50 bob debt, 50 shillings debt. That shows how bad the economy is already doing. So yes, we are overstressed. But if you allow me to talk also about the stormwater.
Yeah.
The stormwater is when there is...
Can we just reserve the stormwater so that, you're so eager to actually talk about the stormwater and the hassle.
The construction project.
My senior, Paul Mwite, has always said that the most important part of doing a road is drainage. We do roads, but the drainage is usually problematic. So stormwater is, in my view, is key in this regard. And remember, I've talked about our road, Langata Road, which is in very bad shape.
In the space right yes. now. But we're talking about the imports, because we can see also the imports have declined, especially ours with China, by 14.9% in 12 months. And we know China leads as Kenya's single source of import. It remained the single leading source of imports in 2021 into 2022, accounting for almost 20.5% of the total imports. What does it really indicate right now, especially with recent visits diplomatically? Because it's, I think also diplomacy is all about perception.
Yeah.
When I see you also rubbing shoulders with my, so to speak, nemesis, at the end of the day, there will be some subtle nuances. Some cold shoulder will come along the way as well. What does this tell us about the imports? Should we be happy? Of course, we should be exporting more. But this, if we are trading with China and this is also falling precipitously, do we have any cause for worry?
No, I do not think we have necessarily cause for worry. One, the consequence of allowing the shilling to fall in value, to get its own level, to devalue it essentially, is to make imports expensive and exports more profitable, as it were. So if in fact part of these exchange rates have been to discourage some of the imports globally, but it will vary by trading partner, depending on what's involved. Generally speaking, it's a good symbol. But what you want to achieve is that even though imports as a whole might decline because how you manage your exchange rate, you're hoping that in that, some of the substitutable goods will be the ones that will be too expensive to import, people don't import, but that essentially intermediate goods that you import in order to produce, those will increase because you want to be able to avail facilities that will grow your production and then your exports. And if in the Chinese sector of our business, that's what is happening, it means that probably the incentives are kind of working. But one has to go to the second order, the second level of depth, and say, just what is it in imports that are declining? If in those intermediate machinery and other intermediate goods that need to be imported to help build local production and exports, then of course we have to look for specific incentives to isolate those so that they are not as adversely affected. But yes, generally speaking, imports become expensive, so consumption should go down.
Right, so less of toothpicks and less of the tissue papers.
I think I want you to open up that. What is that that's not being imported? Because if it is luxury goods, I would probably smile. But if it is very necessary items like raw materials for our industries, I would be concerned. But I think you should also have given us data on growth for exports, so that we see the balance.
Yes.
I agree with you on that. At the moment, there's a shortage of fish. Basically, I mean, I'm a fish eater, so let's...
Yeah, but don't go there on fish.
It's because of the Chinese fish. It's not coming in. Our production of fish is very low in the country. Much as we'd like to encourage it, we've done all the ponds, we've done everything else. And I think this issue of the imports from China coming low, our consumption in this country was driven by the fact that we could get things from China. Not just food, but everything, clothes, everything that people are using, right? China is a big supplier to the basic commodities that people are buying. Not basic commodities, but just commodities that people are buying. Now that it's expensive, automatically that will drop, yeah? And what you're left with is actually the high value items that are coming from China that you can't do without. Yeah, all the machinery, the equipment, all your prime movers and whatever it is that are coming with the whole trucks, what have you, and everything else, those are still coming in because business has to continue. But your average consumer, that is cut down because one, the costs have gone up, and secondly, their purchasing power has been eroded, so they can't buy those things. So what you're seeing with that fall in China is that the basic consumption pattern of your average Kenyan consumer is not allowing them to buy expensive imported items. And China being a big source of it, that is it. And even trying to say we can get import substitution activities in the country, it isn't going to happen that quickly, just because of the inputs and the cost of inputs in Kenya, which are again affected by the same thing. So if you expect to spur growth, because even manufacturing that we're saying, yeah, we increase manufacturing, they need raw materials. And a lot of the only way manufacturing can go in Kenya is to manufacture on a large scale for export. That investment isn't going to happen within this environment we have now. It needs a different environment completely for us to invest in such a way that we are producing at such economies of scale that we are competitive on exports, and it means therefore that internal consumption as well, people can do it because that economy of scale makes it cheaper for me to buy it. So I think we are caught between a rock and a hard place. And this decline in Chinese exports is a very, very good indicator of that hard place we're in.
Hard place, but in a good place.
No, we're in a good place.
I think
hard place in terms of what he says, that at least is a good indication that we're not importing more.
We talked about edible oils around this table.
Yes.
And the challenges, in fact, even scandal that we seem to have had in respect of edible oils imports and so on. The kinds of things that we could have done domestically, locally, we still are importing. So you'd expect that with this exchange rate movement, as things become expensive generally, items like those edible oils will be the ones that will be substituted, not by not having them supplied altogether, but that by producing them from our source base. When the exchange rate moves, items that emanate from your abundant resources should become the ones that now get into play, as opposed to, let's take an example, the brewing companies, and I don't mean a particular company, although you could do that, the brewing companies, instead of saying that they must import something specific from somewhere wherever that might be, they can probably use a local substitute, that kind of thing. I'm told that there was an example somebody used that our fish and chips people import a certain kind of potato that now has to come from, that does come from Egypt, I think, and perhaps South Africa, that the Kenyan producer doesn't produce that particular potato that
it's palatable and
so forth. And it's not because our ecology will not produce it, it's just that it's not yet of scale in the market. But why is it not? So the thing would be that some of items like those, which I think I would classify luxury, would be the ones that should lose out in the game, as it were. But that hopefully that whole potential we have got to produce that potato that is still hidden in Nyandarua and in some other place and some other place and so on, will now be exploited further, and we can begin to fill the market. Sometimes we don't think deeply enough. We always do, but in our discussions and debate, we don't reach out deep enough to say what is it that we can do differently. And use resource endowment. Use the ones where we have plentiful resources. Those are the areas in which you can expand. Otherwise, you're going to be like the Lesotho case with the textiles. There was a time when it was largest exporter from the continent. They produced no cotton virtually, but it's because they imported the cotton and then they manufactured, and so they made a small margin, made money on on turnover and small margins. But it's a way of doing business. And of course, when those relative prices changed and South Africa was no longer a pariah state, that advantage collapsed. So I really think that we should begin to scratch our heads and say, now then, what should be the areas in which we should put emphasis?
It's interesting you're raising the issue of, I know maybe this will be a side by issue, but even as we're talking about expensive food items, we had the edible oil dispensers that Kenyans will have been benefiting from now. If you just have a bottle or a cup, you can just go to a dispenser in a supermarket. That was the pipeline dream that the Ministry of Trade had. But I was reading somewhere in regards to all this, when there's a scandal, and now we've seen the CEO, Pamela Mutua, she's actually out as the CEO of Kenya National Trading Corporation. But the question I was seeing also in the dailies was, how then do we account for such figures that have been embroiled or they've been part of this scandal and corruption of it, then they're taken to the courts and now they're exonerated because of technicalities. I don't know if it's on the way the legal framework is actually crafted, that you cannot actually come straight for you unless you're coming straight for the company. And so many people are using that legal loophole. I don't know if you are aware of what I'm really talking about. I could be maybe so wrong, but people are saying we should review maybe our laws, because so many CEOs are taking advantage of that loophole, that you are untouchable. I'll come for the company, not for the CEO who is responsible. Am I convoluted in it, or because I was reading it and I was saying, yeah. And so they were saying that we should actually look at, because how many people and the CEOs, they've actually used their clammy fingers to eat and steal from the public coffers, and they're left scot-free.
But I think the edible oil scandal provides some of the answers to what you've said. The CEO has become, what could you say?
The scapegoat or the fall guy?
Okay, maybe that, yes, but let's say, you see, you yourself has another view to it. The CEO has been a victim of, I don't know what to say, but there have been...
You know what to say. You're just being cagey on what you want to say.
No, I have to get the right...
sacrificial lamb.
That's what I'm saying. You're very, very editorial in what
maybe that. But there have been many people around that edible oil scandal where heads have rolled, and people have had to refund money. I think it's been done a lot under the table. I don't know if they have done enough of it. And the CEO was just one of those whose level of guilt was lower. But because they're holding a key position and signatures were being liberally added to the papers, she had to go. But there are others also who are facing that. We're just waiting to see a public prosecution of that come to court and so on. It takes a while. But you're right. In trying to pin down and attribute responsibility for corruption, the wheel of the law, the speed at which the law works is slow. The expanse at which it works is narrow. Because if you make it too broad, then you end up with the sort of things that we see in the papers today, that a certain amount of clearly corruptly acquired money that can't go through, the courts are throwing it out, because I guess the span may be too big to place specific blame, and then they throw it out. But I'm sure that my colleagues here have more to say about that.
I can add on that, if you allow me the ball.
Yeah, please.
Because I think if you look at the history of accounting and law and so on, there was always a big distinction between the person and the company. They are distinct. So if I own a company, the company is distinct from me. So you can probably sue the company, but not me.
With a limited
yes, I think that's the loophole they are using. But I think you are right. We need to amend them out of our laws. In the last 10 years, 12 years since we came up with the Constitution, a lot of things have changed. For example, what does our laws say about artificial intelligence? What does it say about deep fake? What does it say about cryptocurrency? So I think we need to change that. But before we go to what's happening with the KNTC and so on, let me add one or two things about what my colleague said about import from China decreasing. I think I would want to talk to manufacturers and ask them whether they are feeling that. Because if there's less import from China, are they getting a bigger market in Kenya? I think I would like to talk to them and hear about that. Now, he talked about potatoes, because I'm not a very big fan of potatoes, but potatoes from Nyandarua or Moro or from Timau are probably better than potatoes from Egypt. Just a question of perception. The same way you feel that I should be called Ken, not Onyango, I should be called Michelle, not Wanjiko. It's the same way with the products that we import. People are made to believe that certain products are better than others. Not based on fundamentals, but just based on perception and branding. And maybe that's what we should be doing. If the imports are decreasing, then we should probably be selling our brands, showing people that our products are as good as other from other countries. Because at the end of the day, if we have to create jobs in this country, we must have our own industries. We manufacture in this country and import and consume our goods and services. But you cannot always be talking about imports.
Indeed. All right. I think unless Dr. Shema Ochodo was a bit antsy to talk about the Hustlers 3000. Yeah.
No, that's fine. But I could also add just my voice to manufacturing. For me, I think there is no shortcut to this. We just must produce more and export more. And maybe it's a time to call out our organization, Keproba. I don't think enough is being done in terms of promoting local production and export. I don't think there are two ways about it. I was listening also to the CS of Agriculture saying we're happy we've imported, I think, about 3 million or so bags of fertilizer. I would even be much happier. Instead of spending, I don't know whether it was 20 billion shillings or how much it was, spend maybe 15 billion to import, but use 5 billion to promote local production of organic fertilizer. Ultimately, 100% of fertilizer we use should be organic, in my view, and should be locally produced, because we have capacity to produce that. So I wanted to emphasize that aspect, that I really think we need to do more about manufacturing and exporting part of what we produce. In terms of the stormwater, you allowed me to go there now?
Yeah. Can we just lay it into perspective or context before we go to the stormwater?
Sure.
Right. There is this latest development that you should be aware of right now, that hustlers, they have to pay 3,000 shillings rent daily for roadside structures. This is what the Business Daily is flagging here as a side by story. And it says that owners of temporary structures on road reserves in Kenya's cities will be required to pay a minimum fee of 3,000 shillings daily, and the proposed regulations that will also allow the government to lease road reserve space. And Kenyans will also be expected to pay a one-off fee of 50,000 shillings to be allowed to direct stormwater into public road drainages. The charges proposed in drafts Kenya Roadside Stations Regulations 2023 signals. I'll jump over to page 3 later, but this is some of the proposals that you can see here. Well illustrated, selected proposed charges of leasing road reserves from class S, A and B. And it says also, they are broken down for you. 50,000 shillings is 5,000 shillings is the application fee will be required for access road construction. I think the 50,000 is one fee. I don't know if it's of type, but there is 5,000. The other one is 50,000. So we're yet to confirm what is the actual required figure. But let's begin from there. This is what Dr. Chemotodo wants to channel.
Unless Kenya Kwanza changes tax, I think one thing, legacy that's going to leave behind, that it will be remembered for a long time, is overtaxing Kenyans. It looks like the administration is looking both at the national and county levels, looking at every avenue through which they can raise revenue. I think, like my colleagues around the table have said, first, let's seal the loopholes. Let's be more prudent in spending what we already have. I think there's been no clear demonstration, in my view, in that regard, that the austerity measures in terms of government expenditure, that we are doing everything to make sure that we use money cost efficiently. But having said that, in terms of, it's ridiculous that we want to charge these hustlers 3,000 shillings a day, because assuming that that's what we're going to charge them, in a month we'll be charging them about 100,000 shillings. For somebody to pay that, I mean, you have not factored in all the other expenses they pay, it means that they're probably making like about 300,000 shillings a month to comfortably pay that. In that case, maybe a number of even teachers would resign from teaching to come and hawk on the streets. I don't think they make that amount of money. So for me, this 3,000 shillings a day sounds ridiculous, unless there's something that government has done. Maybe they have collected data, analyzed to see how much the roadside hawkers are making. In terms of people paying 50,000 to drain into government roads, I think in as much as Nairobi governor at one point was publicly on record bragging how much they were well prepared for the El Nino, but when it struck, there were major problems of flooding in Nairobi. I guess the stormwater here happens when there's a heavy downpour. And then people being asked to pay 50,000. Normally, not everybody feeds directly into the main road. Chances are you would go through, Professor would go through Daktari's home, and his would go through Patrick's home and through Debal's home before you eventually get to the government road. Are you saying each of these guys are going to pay 50,000 shillings to do that, to pass their water? So for me, this is really just outright ridiculous.
Yeah. I think this is, excuse me saying this, is absolute madness to even consider what this is being done here. When I started hearing about this, and I was talking about when they're talking about roads and having, motels and service stations along highways and stuff, that was a great idea, right? Yeah. In terms of creating proper rest places for people using roads and going long distances, instead of having to rush into a petrol station, which is actually purely for fueling a vehicle. You have a nice, expansive, 20, 30 acres where you can park, you can walk, you can go into a restaurant, you can shower, you can do whatever it is. That we absolutely need on our roads in Kenya. But now you're saying that you're going to get people you're actually creating a framework for people to sit on the side of the road. We have forgotten very quickly what happened in Londiani the other day when a lorry plowed into people and killed them. And the same ministry is actually saying, let's bring people onto the road legally. I think that's madness, complete madness. Road reserves are supposed to create a space to insulate the public from transport. And therefore, when you're driving on a road, it's a dangerous thing, a vehicle. When it loses control, you need to create a space where people will not be present, so that the vehicle crashes into an empty space. To now even contemplate putting people in that space, I think is the wrong thing, absolutely. And if we're looking for money, let's look for money elsewhere. I was saying earlier on, I love driving around the country. And the place I enjoyed driving most was between Isiolo and Marsabit, where the area that is clear on either side of the road is almost 20, 30 meters. So when you're driving and there's a potential emergency coming onto the road, you can see it from a long distance, and you will actually be able to brake and take evasive action. But when you put these structures right next on the road reserve, imagine a child being chased by a dog somewhere behind all this stuff that is put there. And the child, their focus is running from the dog. And they'll come straight onto the street. And after you're driving along and the road reserve has been taken, you will not see that child until they're on the road and you knock them. Is that what we're asking for this country to happen in this country? I think it's the wrong thing, absolutely. I mean, I'm a safety professional. And this kind of thing saddens me when I see a responsible government ministry trying to create unsafe situations for Kenyans. It should not happen. What the minister said after Londiani is exactly what they should do. Remove people from the roadside, create that buffer where people are not present, and then give them space to trade properly. They have
Outside of the road reserve.
Outside of the road reserve. Let us not put Kenyans in places where they're exposed to danger. And I think whoever is crafting this thing, I think we need to have words with them. It's not the right thing to do for this country.
Indeed, this was a good question there. I don't know, is the mic correct?
Yeah.
Well,
I need to
sort out my mic a bit. Chevy, can be continuing? Yes.
No, I just want to go back to his drainage, yeah?
Or is
the storm? The storm drain, yeah.
Prof wanted to come in. Go ahead.
Yeah, that storm drain needs to be taken away because the storm drain needs the infrastructure to then continue taking the water to where it's supposed to happen. And that storm drain, if you say, I will pay 50,000 shillings to put it near the road, the evacuation from the road to the river to everything else has to be there first. And what you're seeing now in terms of roads being damaged and everything else is because everybody puts water onto the road and it goes nowhere and it stays there, and then the roads get damaged because of water. So again, I think we really need to be very careful what we say when we put bills into Parliament to do this kind of thing.
I think this is a very interesting debate. The first one is about structures on city roadside structures on roadside. Now, when you start putting structures on road reserves, I thought road reserves are just road reserves. They should be road reserves.
Always.
For two good reasons. One, either there is space for emergencies, there is space for parking, there is space for future development of roads. In fact, I thought what we should be talking about is when are we going to build roads on these road reserves if they are for building roads? Now we are saying we occupy them. So to me, it does not add up. Number two is the charges for drainage. I thought that's what the government is supposed to do. That's what the minister is supposed to do. Now, we seem to be fighting nature. So if my house is on the top of a hill, I expect the water to rain down into the road or onto whatever drainage is. Now, when you start charging me to access, to get access road to private premises, access road to private petrol stations, access road to malls, are we supposed to build these premises without roads? Or what are they telling us? I thought the government should even be paying me to put up these premises. Because once I put a mall, once I put a petrol station, the government starts getting money from that tax. Mm-hmm. And they should be encouraging us to build those facilities so that they get more taxes from whatever we eat, from the petrol that we take. Now you're telling us, before you put that petrol station, before you put that mall, you have to pay me for access. Mm-hmm. Now, is it possible to have a mall without a road? Is it possible to have a petrol station without a road? And my fear is, if this works, now they are going to tell us you are going to start paying access to everything else. You have access to schools, access to hotels, access to everything will be charged. So I think this is the work of the government. This is the work of the Ministry of Public Roads. We should not start charging us for access.
Yeah, so they're actually loading off all this work to wananchi at the end of the day, and we still pay through our noses through the taxes for these amenities that.
That's exactly my argument.
So this is sort of a double taxation again we're talking about here.
With a light touch, Debal, we might soon start charging you to breathe the air that you because you seem to be charging you for everything,
access to
for
the
weddings and so on.
I normally have Honorable Dan Manzo here saying, we can't breathe. We can't breathe. Just following
just going back to this thing and reading the article, I mean, I don't know whether this is in the bill that is there. Those seeking to lease road reserves within cities for between 10 and 29 years will pay 420,000 shillings as application, processing and administrative fees. Charges outside cities will be 330,000. And then long-term leases will then attract 15% of the unimproved site value as a stand premium, followed by an annual rent equivalent of 10% of the unimproved site value and rent escalation charge of 15%. This is setting up a gravy train for somebody, 100%. Who is going to, if this even happens, and I hope it doesn't, and you look at the number of kilometers of roads within urban areas around the country, how many businesses are going to be in these small areas? And how are you going to set up a system of collecting that rent or whatever it is? It is going to go into some people's pockets very quickly, because to be able to, even now, just getting rent from council houses, whatever it is and so forth, is a problem. This, for me, is, I think, as I keep saying, it's absolute madness. I think whoever came up with this thing, their heads should be should be checked.
Could we maybe be seeing a link here where recently we saw that there was a legal fees that is being slapped on Kenha. Was it 65 billion shillings that they had to pay because of not following the contractual agreements they did not honor? So could this also be another way of raising these particular funds to pay those legal fees? Because in this country, you have to connect dots. You say, okay, where is this coming from? We see some 65 billion shillings that Kenya has to pay contractual breaches, and now they're actually scrounging around for money every which way because roads itself. And God forbid, I think I had an eventuality where at some point, way back, I think in 2013, I dozed off on the wheel, and it was around 11 a.m., you can imagine. So it was just a toll of work, and I veered off the road. It actually overturned along Bagathi Way, and I went to a drainage there, a big one. It's just near the total station there when you're going to Strathmore School, that particular road. Yes. So I woke up and admittedly, so I have a few scratches here, at least just one from that particular incident. But I always thank God and say, God,
there's nobody on the side.
If there were mama mbogas on the side who were selling their mbogas there, what sort of a case will I be in? Someone was, perhaps, rolled over or crushed by that particular car. Yeah, for me, I came out with a few bruises, but a life will have been lost. So I'm looking at this road reserve and we're talking about it. And I have a friend of mine as well. I think we used to work together. He went to Dubai. He came back. He had the same incident, and somebody died. I think it was a Mama Mboga along Jogo Road as well, because of him. He was speeding and it veered off the road, and somebody died. So when we encourage this, just reminding us about Loneni, I think it just brings back that particular memory that is really traumatizing, so to speak.
I think for Bagathi Road.
But indeed, I'd raise the question of 65 billion shillings. Do you think in any way there's a connectedness there that Kenya is seeking to...
Maybe chairman, being part of government.
I thought shame would be
the chairman is not the chair of Kenya.
To provide those linkages. But in that case, now that it's drawn me to the field, I just hope that Kenya would be part of one of the key institutions to help keep clear the road reserves. And then it means, therefore, that beyond the road reserves, whatever investments take place are not going to be the responsibility of Kenya. It's going to be from local governments and national government beyond the road reserve. Let us keep road reserves. And all these guys have been countries that have managed this well, where you get formalized shopping and stopping places along the highway. You branch get into, and you meet the local construction code, public health codes, and so. It's not part of the road reserve. I think to go anywhere near what they are proposing has a lot of problems. You can't reverse them easily without perhaps causing violence and so on. You give somebody a 15-year lease, a 20-something-year lease, that's madness. Or any lease at all on the road reserve. Road reserve should be kept as a road reserve, really.
Right.
The bulk, for me, in terms of if we have to always connect dots, it means we have a serious problem. And maybe a little advice to Kenya Kwanza government. If the one singular thing they did, if this was the only thing they did in their 5-year term, restoring confidence in institutions and in ourselves, value systems, we would have achieved a lot more. You know, look at just the case of what Nyerere did in Tanzania. Economically, it didn't do a lot, but the mere fact that inculcated patriotism, national unity, some good manners made a whole lot of difference. But I think urban planning is a key issue. In fact, I was even thinking, apart from the roadside hawkers, even provision for pedestrians or cyclists. In the more advanced parts of the world, you normally find they make provisions. In our case, the pedestrians have to fight with the motorists and the cyclists on the same roads.
And the hawkers.
And the hawkers as well. So I think if we did our planning a little better and made provision for better use of our roads, I think it would be nice. But lastly, I have a problem when we look for every little reason or excuse to collect money. It borders on extorting money from Kenyans. It's not right.
Right, it's not right. And I think on this forum we had also raised the issue that for me, maybe after media want to become a preacher, but I can't go and preach in Jivanji because I have to pay 1,000 shillings to Sakaja. Even for the street preachers now, they are there, right? Even the 3,000 will be for the street preachers. So if you are actually thinking about carrying your Bible this morning and going on a can walk,
but I
think they've really upped it from 1,000 now to 3,000 shillings. You cannot be a street preacher here in this country.
But I've seen the connection. Not that 65 billion, but something else. If you look at page 4 of the Business Daily.
Page 4.
Yes, there's a very interesting small headline there. 17 parastatals holding 80% of 9.5 trillion public assets. And one of them is Kenya. So maybe Kenya has realized that these road reserves are an asset. Why don't we commercialize them? So there's a very good connection there. But I think